on to anthropology. Ancient cave ritual from 10,000 years ago may be the world's oldest tradition. In the charcoal remains of fires that smoldered more than 10,000 years ago, archaeologists have found evidence of what may be the longest continuing ritual, shared across generations of indigenous Australians since the end of the last ice age to this day. The ancestral lands of the Gunai Aboriginal people lie in the foothills of the Australian Alps, an Alp area in the southeastern Australia dotted with rock boulders and limestone caves, and extended southwest to the Victorian coast. These caves weren't used by the Goni-Kurani people for shelter. I don't think that. As secluded retreats for magical practitioners known as the Mula Mulong. I repeat, I am so sorry. Ethnographers documented the practices in the 1800s, but archaeologists inspecting the caves in the 1970s overlooked them because magic rituals didn't fit with their mainly secular interpretations of the caves as places to cook and sleep. Now, a team of let's actually work with the people who used it from there. At least descended from there. Now, a team of archaeologists working with. I mean, it's not like there's. It's like trying to figure out something when you don't have ancestors there is completely different from the other. Now, a team of archaeologists working with the Gunai-Kurani people have unearthed and described two miniature fireplaces ringed by limestone rocks, each containing a single stick of casuarina wood stripped of the side branches and smeared with fatty tissues. Ethnographic accounts from Australia in the 19th century describe these rituals conducted in the caves by an esteemed doctor away from the rest of the community. Some European accounts describe the role as one who bewitched or healed of bewitching, describing the objects looped from or touched by an intended victim that were attached to a piece of wood and burned briefly with some human or animal fat. Monash University archaeologist Bruno David, Gunani Kurani elder Russell Mullet, and their colleagues have now uncovered evidence of this practice deep within Clogg's cave. The fireplaces inside the cave are thought to have been rapidly buried soon after they were last used by sediments that date back some 10,000 to 12,000 years to the end of the last ice age and the dawn of the Haleocene. Why did I say Haleo? Is it Haleocene? Our current geological epoch. What's more is the two fireplaces are nearly identical, yet the team's data suggests they were built and used 1,000 years apart. It wasn't a goon cave, by the way. It was a bewitching and or unbewitching cave. As excavated in 2020 with the permission and help of the Gunani-Kurani Aboriginal elders, the fireplaces and the wooden implements, which would have decayed had they been exposed, have been preserved out of sight for millennia. This means it's unlikely that abandoned remains of the ritual could have been seen or copied by native newcomers into the cave, supporting the claims that Gunani-Kurani people's traditions have been orally shared for at least 10,000 years. The suite of factors contributing to the survival of both fireplaces and their wooden artifacts provides unparalleled insight into the resilience of the Gunani-Kurani narrative traditions, David and his colleagues wrote in their published paper. These findings are not about the memory of the ancestral practice, but the passing down of knowledge in virtually unchanged form from one generation to the next, over some 500 generations. After centuries of colonial disposition and dismissal, Archaeologists and other scientists are beginning to learn from and work more respectfully with Australia's First Nations people, integrating their traditional knowledge into scientific analysis to enrich and strengthen the findings. These analyses often of genetic histories confirm what indigenous people have known all along and continue to assert through oral traditions, that they maintain deep connections to their ancestral lands. In Australia specifically, researchers have matched ancient creation stories telling of the Gunditjmara people's ancestors being born out of volcanic eruptions to the geological records of those same events. Similar oral traditions of the Palawa people of the Tanzania tell of rising seas that flooded the land bridge connecting the island to the mainland Australia some 12,000 years ago, and of the constellations that lit up the night sky at the time. This new work involving the Guni-Kurnani people differs slightly in that the team has uncovered delicate handmade remnants of ritual practices preserved like the oral traditions themselves. So cool. Alright. I'm kind of excited about this one. Fossilized bone of Neanderthal with Down syndrome challenges the idea of prehistoric care. The discovery of a Neanderthal child with what appears to be significant health complications indicative of Down syndrome has swayed debate over the origins of communal health care within our species. In a new study, a research team from Spain says the fact that the child survived to at least age 6, despite severe hearing loss and balance issues, demonstrates the complexity of social care among our closest evolutionary relatives, the Neanderthals. The child's survival relied on more support than a mother could give, suggesting an assistance from a wider group in challenging the ideas that prehistoric caregivers only extended to immediate family or those who could reciprocate the favor. Neanderthals have long been known to care for sick and injured in their community, but there's a debate around the motivations behind this behavior. Fossils from children with conditions that would have needed help from other groups members to survive offer a rare opportunity to study this further. The fossil, coded CN 46700, is a temporal bone from a set of Neanderthal remains excavated in 1989 from the Cova Negra campsite in Spain, occupied by the species between 273,000 to 146,000 years ago. Researchers used micro-CT scans to construct a 3D model of the original fossil for analysis. The analysis revealed that CN 46700 had characteristics typical of Neanderthals and developmental features indicating the child was older than 6 years. They also found signs of health issues, including smaller... My mind's having a moment. My mind is having a moment. I was about to say, that's what I thought. Cochlea, which is the inner part of the ear. That's what I was thinking. My mind was going... And abnormalities in the shortest ear canal that would have caused hearing loss and severe dizziness. The only syndrome that is compatible with the entire set of malformations present in CN 46700 is Down syndrome. University of Alcala paleoanthropologist Mercedes Convey Valdere and her colleagues write. Consequently, all available evidence suggests that the individual probably had Down syndrome, which is the most common human genetic disorder, and it is even present in great apes. Living to the age of 6 is remarkable. Of 3 known examples of children born with Down syndrome in the Iron Age, none of them live longer than 16 months. Other fossil records of inner ear abnormalities that affect hearing and balance belong to adults with features commonly resulting from infections, not conditions present at birth. Down syndrome is usually a result of a random error in cell division during egg or sperm formation, leading to an extra copy or partial copy of the chromosome 21 in the body's cells. This impacts development and increases the risk of multiple health issues, including heart defects and epilepsy. In 1900, people with Down syndrome had a 9-year life expectancy. Today, advances in medicine and social support means that those in developed countries can live over 60 years. Down syndrome often involves impairments that affect growth, physical, and cognitive development and motor skills. Children frequently have delays in walking and talking, problems with balance and coordination that increase the risks of falls, and difficulty breastfeeding due to weak muscle tone. The symptoms experienced by them would have included, at a minimum, severe hearing loss and markedly reduced sense of balance and equilibrium, they wrote. Neanderthals had a demanding lifestyle, and it's unlikely that a mother could have provided all necessary care to a child with Down syndrome while also performing daily tasks. The survival of this child shows that our hominin cousin received extensive and ongoing support from the broader group, even though the child was unable to provide direct equivalent reciprocation. This suggests that caregivers may have been driven by compassion. The presence of this complex social adaptation in both Neanderthals and our own species suggests a very ancient origin within the genus Homo, said the authors concluded. Speaking about Neanderthals, autism linked with our DNA with our ancestors inherited by Neanderthals. Woo! Sorry. Fun. Some type deep within our evolutionary past. We can make jokes that I am a Neanderthal. Woo! I know some people might take that as an insult. I'm just... There's other good things that came from Neanderthals, and people act like they're stupid. But they're actually quite smart. It's just... it's kind of like those societal common beliefs that they weren't smart, but they quite were. One of the things I remember reading about what caused them a lot of problems was when Neanderthals had smaller hips, would often cause the women to die in birth. So it was not stupidity that really killed them. I'm not gonna remember how to spell that. Researchers know that Neanderthals had even larger brains than most humans do, but it's unclear whether the Neanderthal pattern of growth was a slow or whether it was a fast. Well, do we even can tell if they're wrinkling? I don't know. The evidence for cognitive inferiority is simply not there. What we're saying, the most conventional view of Neanderthals is not there. Yeah. But I know it's always been used as an insult to some degree. Sometime in our evolutionary past, most likely more than once, a significant amount of Neanderthal DNA became mixed in with ours. Influence everything from how we now fight illness to even our appearance. A new study by researchers from the Clemson University and Loyola University in the US now suggests that some of this stolen DNA could be linked to autism spectrum disorder, specifically the polymorphism or variations in the DNA passed down from Neanderthals becoming more common in people with autism compared to the general population. I ungo where I should bunga. Yeah. The team analyzed DNA from 3,442, so it's a reasonable amount. I wouldn't say it's a large amount, but it's not like a 200-person thing and say it. Or like have 34 people and say that this is what causes autism, you know? Vaccines. That was later, debunked. Thoroughly debunked on the autism thing. Vaccines causing injury, vaccines causing autism. You should always pay attention to, usually sample sizes to some degree. And the methodology by which they decide how they look at stuff. Like, which factors they put down. Like, it's 33% in scientific journals that might be, like, absolutely false, or, like, studies that cannot be reproduced. Kind of thing. False studies, or false... increasing concern that most current published... That's the reason why I want to make it clear that just because I read about it doesn't mean it's 100%, you know, kind of thing. The probability that the research claim is true, and one of the things you have to understand when, and I'm getting off topic, ADHD woo, is just because I read it aloud this time around doesn't mean that A, it's true, and especially if this happens with, you know, the scientific study that says doing this will help your age or whatever, you know, skin look better, all this other stuff. The probability that a research claim is true may depend on the study power and bias, the number of other studies on the same question, and more importantly, the ratio of true to no relationship among the relationships probed in each scientific field. There is actual, a paper farm, in the sense of scientific paper farm, where people can buy and put their names on the stuff, because the way that publications, like how you get renowned in science is the amount of papers you publish, but that doesn't mean that it's, you know, correct. When the studies conducted in the field are smaller. In this framework, a research finding is less likely to be true when the studies are conducted in a field that are smaller, when effective sizes are smaller, when there is a greater number and lesser pre-selection of test relationships, when there is a greater flexibility in designs, definitions, and outcomes, and analytical modes, when there is greater financial or other interest prejudice, and when more teams are involved in the scientific field in chase of statistical significance. Simulations show that for most study designs and settings, it's more likely for a research claim to be false than true. Moreover, for many current scientific fields, claim to research findings may often be simply accurate measures of the prevailing biases. Let's see. But yeah. Because when you especially are creating studies, you can decide which parameters you want to look at and ignore which parameters you don't want to look at, and therefore kind of skew the study so it goes in the way you want it to. Anyways, the team analyzed the data from 3,442 people in total with and without autism. The association held across black non-Hispanic, white Hispanic, and white non-Hispanic people, though the balance was different in each of those populations. It has been estimated that Eurasian derivement populations have approximately 2% Neanderthal DNA, which was acquired during the introgression events, occurring shortly after atomically modern humans migrated out of Africa, the researchers wrote. With this recent sequence of multiple archaic human genomes, there has been a growing interest concerning the influence of archaic human-derived alleles. I know what it is. It's just my mind is having moments trying to say it aloud. On modern health, previous research found in Neanderthal DNA shapes certain structures on the brain. Since people with autism have similar neural patterns to each other, the potential role of Neanderthal genes is the relationships the researchers wanted to look more closely at. The study was able to identify 25 specific polymorphisms that affect gene expression in the brain, which is more common in people with autism. In some cases, epilepsy was involved, a condition that autism is often accompanied by. Sorry, that slipped down. For example, a variant in the SLC37A1 gene was shown to be present in 67% of white non-Hispanic autistic people with epilepsy, who also had autistic family members, compared to the 26% of autistic people without epilepsy and 22% of people without epilepsy or autism. It's not that people with or without autism differ in the amount of Neanderthal DNA they possess, but rather how common certain specific bits of Neanderthal DNA are. What's more, this varies between individuals, so we're talking about a very complex picture here. However, the evidence outlined here is strong enough to warrant investigation in future studies. We've still got a lot to learn about both about Neanderthals and their lasting impacts on our own physiology, and how autism changes the way the brain functions. We're still not sure exactly how Neanderthals and ancient humans originally interacted, for example, or how autism changes brain connections so that people with a condition see the world in a different way. Really? Do I? No. This is the first study to prove strong evidence for an active role of a subset of rare as well as common Neanderthal driven alleles. Alright, night, Lone Wolf, hope you sleep well. Say, I do plan on posting this on YouTube too, so. In autism, susceptible in a multiple major American populations. Possible, yeah. We hope this research will, well, what I do is split it up into different, like, the space one, and then the biology one, and then the whatever ones are, and put it on my YouTube, so. But I only do it once a week, every Thursday, for each one that I split up, so. We hope this research will lead to further investigations into ongoing influence in the ancient hybridization between Homo sapiens, Neanderthals in brain development, human intelligence, and overall human health, as well as spur work in additional clinical resources for this complex population. Alright. On to more DNA things. DNA from Beethoven's hair reveals a surprise some 200 years later. One stormy Monday in March 1827, the German composer Ludwig van Beethoven passed away after a protracted illness. Bedridden since previous Christmas. He was attacked by jaundice. His limbs and abdomen were swollen. Each breath was a struggle. That sucks. As his associates went about the task of sorting through personal belongings, they uncovered a document Beethoven had written a quarter of a century earlier. a will beseeching his brothers to make details of his condition known to the public. Today it is no secret that one of the greatest musicians the world has ever known was functionally deaf by his mid-40s. It was a tragic irony Beethoven wished the world understood, not just from a personal perspective, but a medical one. The composer would outlive his doctor by nearly 2 decades, yet close to 2 centuries after Beethoven's death, a team of researchers set out to fulfill his testament in ways he never could have dreamed possible. By genetically analyzing the DNA in authenticated samples of his hair. Our primary goal was to shed light on Beethoven's health problems, which famously included progressive hearing loss, beginning in his mid to late 20s, and eventually leading him to be functionally deaf by 1818. Sorry. Johannes Cross from the Max Planck Institute of Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany explained in a press statement in 2023, when the results were unveiled, the primary cause of that hearing loss has never been known, not even to his personal physician, Dr. John Adam Smith. What began as tinnitus in his early 20s slowly gave way to a reduced tolerance for loud noise, and eventually a loss of hearing in higher pitches, effectively ending his career as a performing artist. For a musician, there was another one that was quite popular that did orchestra work that also lost his hearing, but that was more, I guess, in the 20th century. For a musician, nothing could be more ironic. In a letter addressed to his brothers, Beethoven admitted he was hopelessly afflicted to the point of contemplating suicide. But it wasn't just hearing loss the composer had to deal with in his adult life. From at least the age of 22, he is said to have suffered severe abdominal pains and chronic bouts of diarrhea. 6 years before his death, the first indications of liver disease appeared, an illness thought to have been, at least in part, responsible for his death at the relatively young age of 56. In a 2007 forensic investigation into a lock of what is believed to be Beethoven's hair, suggests that lead poisoning could have hastened his death, if not have ultimately been responsible for the symptoms that claimed his life. Damn. Given the culture of drinking from lead vessels and medical treatments of the time that involved the use of lead, it's hardly a surprising conclusion. This latest study, published in March 2023, debunks the theory, however, revealing that the hair never came from Beethoven in the first place, but rather an unknown woman. More importantly, several locks confirmed as far likely to be from the composer's head demonstrated his death was probably the result of hepatitis B infection, exacerbated by drinking and numerous factors for liver disease. I mean, if you're feeling that bad, drinking probably helps. As for his other conditions, we are unable to find a definitive cause for Beethoven's deafness or gastrointestinal problems. In some ways, we're left with more questions on life and death of the famous classical composer. Where did he contract hepatitis? How did a lock of women's hair pass as Beethoven's own for centuries? I don't know. We didn't have DNA back then. And just what was behind his gut pains and hearing loss? Given the team was inspired by Beethoven's desire for the world to understand his hearing loss, it's an unfortunate outcome, though there was one more surprise buried amongst his dreams. Further investigation comparing the Y chromosome in hair samples with those of modern relatives descending from Beethoven's parental line point to a mismatch. This suggests extramarital sex activity in generations leading up to the composer's birth. This finding suggests that an extra pair of paternity event in his paternal line between the conception of Hendrik van Beethoven in Clapton, Belgium in 1572 and the conception of Ludwig van Beethoven 7 generations later in 1770 in Bonn, Germany. Tristan Beck, a biological anthropologist at the University of Cambridge in the UK. It all could have been more than a more than a younger Beethoven bargained for, considering the fateful request he put in paper. Never would he have dreamed of the secrets that were being preserved as his friends and associates clipped the hair from his body in the wake of the sober. Oi. That is interesting. Goodness. Alright. The mysterious ecocide collapse of Easter Island never really happened. The people of Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, were not the instruments of their own demise, according to a new research. In a comprehensive new study, researchers found that the population of monument carvers could not possibly have been big enough to collapse under the demands placed on their environment, as previously suggested. The myth of the so-called Rapa Nui ecocide, held up for decades as a cautionary tale about over-exploitation of natural resources, should firmly be relegated to the bin of outdated theories, scientists now say. This finding is just the latest in a mountain body of evidence that the specific islanders' population decline had nothing to do with their way of living. In fact, the collapse soon after European contact in the 1700s probably had more to do with the slave trade, enforced migration, and introduction of pathogens. I could understand the pathogens part from a while ago, but boy. The findings was based on an analysis of the rock gardens found in Rapa Nui, in which the islanders grew their food. A team led by archaeologist Dylan Davis of the Columbian Climate School conducted a new satellite survey of the sites and found that the number of these gardens could not have supported a population large enough to collapse under its own weight. This shows that the population could never have been as big as some previous estimates. The lesson is the opposite of the collapse theory. People were able to be very resilient in the face of limited resources by modifying the environment in a way that helped. According to the ecocide theory, popularized by American researcher and historian Jared Diamond, a population of thousands of Pacific Islanders once lived on Rapa Nui. In Diamond's versions of events, this native population cut down all the trees, which left the fertile soil vulnerable to erosion. This meant that they couldn't grow as much food, so they started starving, resorting to war, cannibalism, and ultimately collapse. Well, I would say, just because there weren't trees doesn't mean there wasn't grass or, like, other things to keep from erosion, but okay. Moreover, more and more, however, scientists have been discovering that Rapa Nui people were a lot more resilient and resourceful than the collapse narrative suggests. In addition to sweet potatoes grown in their rocky gardens, the islanders ate seafood, and more evidence suggests that they were still there on the island, living quite happily when the Europeans arrived. However, previous satellite surveys of the rock gardens seem to support the notion of a large population. Of the 164 square kilometer, or the 63 square mile area of the island, as much as 21.1 square kilometers was devoted to gardens, these surveys found, supporting a possible population up to 17,000 people, much higher than the 3,000 or so reported by the first European visitors. Davis and his colleagues went about their survey in a highly methodical fashion and found the support for different interpretations. The island's rock gardens were built by strewing up to boulder-sized rocks over low ground that would have been more protected from wind erosion and salt spray from the ocean. In the gaps between the rocks, the islanders planted their crops. This can be difficult to differentiate from normal fields of rocks, particularly on a rocky island. So the researchers spent 5 years carefully surveying rock gardens on the ground and cataloging their properties, such as high levels of soil moisture and nitrogen. They then trained a machine learning algorithm to identify these properties in satellite data recorded by shortwave infrared imaging. There are natural rock outcrops all over the place that have been misidentified as rock gardens in the past. The shortwave imagery gives a different picture, Davis says. The results showed that only around 0.76 square kilometers of Rapa Nui were devoted to rock gardens, which alone could have supported a population of around 2,000 people. Add other food sources, such as seafood already mentioned, and other crops such as bananas, and the island could only have sustained a population of around 3,000 people, the team thinks. This matches with the number found by the first Europeans in 1722, suggesting that the Rapa Nui people were living happily and sustainably at the time. By 1877, the population just numbered over 100. Oh, goodness. The anthropometric seems pretty straightforward from here. Our results help refine the estimates of agricultural productivity, suggesting that previous estimates were between 5 and 20 times too high. This finding holds significant implications for the estimates of population size and subsistence strategies of the Rapa Nui people before European contact. In further research, the researchers plan to use the data to model the Rapa Nui population more comprehensively and give us a new tool for understanding their society and how it was destroyed. Alright, on to other stuff. The first of its kind signal was detected in the human brain. Scientists have identified a unique form of cell messaging occurring in the human brain, revealing just how much we still have to learn about its mysterious inner workings. Excitingly, the discovery hints that our brains might be even more powerful units of computation than we realize. Computation, excuse me. Back in 2020, researchers from the Institute of Germany and Greece reported a mechanism in the brain's outer cortical cells that produced a novel graded signal all on its own, one that could provide individual neurons with another way to carry out their logical functions. By measuring the electrical activity in the sections of tissues removed during surgery in epileptic patients and analyzing their structure using fluorescent microscopy, neurologists found individual cells in the cortex use not just the usual sodium ions to fire, but calcium as well. This combination of positively charged ions kicked waves of voltage that had never been seen before, referred to as a calcium-mediated dendritic action potentials, or DCAPs. Brains, especially those of the human variety, are often compared to computers. The analogy has its limits, but on some levels they perform tasks in similar ways. Both use the power of electrical voltage to carry out various operations. In computers, it is in the form of a rather simple flow of electrons through intersections called transistors. In neurons, the signal... Goodness, wait. My mind's going. Forgetting how to read. Woo! In neurons, the signal is in the form of a wave of opening and closing channels. And that exchange of I have 4 more, well, including the 3 more articles together. Opening and closing channels that exchange charged particles such as sodium, chloride, and potassium. This pulse of flowing ions is called an action potential. Instead of transistors, neurons manage these messages chemically at the end of branches called dendrites. The dendrites are central to understanding the brain because they are at the core of what determines computational power of single neurons, says Humboldt University neuroscientist Matthew Larkham told Walker Beckwith at the American Association for Advancement of Science in January 2020. Dendrites are the traffic lights of our nervous system. If an action potential is significant enough, it can pass on to other nerves, which can block or pass on the message. 1 second. This is the logical underpinnings of our brain. Ripples of voltage that can be communicated collectively in two forms. Either an AND message, if X and Y are triggered, the message is passed on, or an OR message, oh, we're programming now. If X or Y is triggered, the message is passed on. Arguably, nowhere is this more complex than the dense, wrinkled outer section of the human central nervous system, the cerebral cortex. The deeper second and third layers. Come on, you can do this. I believe in me. Are especially thick, packed with branches that carry out high-order functions we associate with sensation, thought, or motor control. It was tissues from these layers that researchers took a close look at, hooking up cells to a device called a somatodendric patch clamp to send active potentials up and down each neuron and recording their signals. There was like a eureka moment when we saw the dendritic action potentials for the first time. To ensure any discoveries weren't unique to people with epilepsy, they double-checked their results in a handful of samples taken from brain tumors. While the team had carried out similar experiments on rats, the kind of signals they observed buzzing through the human cells were very different. More importantly, when they dosed the cell with a sodium channel blocker called tetrodotoxin, they found a signal. Only by blocking calcium did all fall quiet. Finding an action potential mediated by calcium is interesting enough, but modeling the way that this sensitive new kind of signal worked within the cortex revealed a surprise. In addition to the logical and or types functions, these individual neurons could act as exclusive OR intersections, which only permit a signal when the other signal is graded in a particular fashion. Or it's XOR. Traditionally, the XOR operation has been thought to require a network solution. More work needs to be done to see how these caps behave across entire neurons and in a living system, not to mention whether it's a human thing or if similar mechanisms have evolved somewhere in the animal kingdom. Technology has also looked into our own nervous system for inspiration on how to develop better hardware. Knowing our own individual cells have few more tricks up their sleeves could lead to new ways in network transistors. Exactly how this new logic tool squeezed into a single nerve cell translates into higher functions is a question for future researchers to answer. I just wanted to cover this just because the rest of the world did. The rest of the world already had this banned. FDA finally outlaws soda ingredients banned around the world. An ingredient once commonly used in citrus-flavored soda to keep the tangy taste mixed thoroughly throughout the beverage has finally been banned for good across the United States. The FDA has now revoked the registration of a modified vegetable oil known as BVO in the wake of recent toxicology studies that make it difficult to support its ongoing use. It hasn't been wanting to be used for a while. Oi. The proposed action is an example of how agency monitors emerging evidence. Except it took so fucking long. Yay, capitalism. Because after all, you know who pays for these studies? Partially? The drug companies and the other industries. So they're paying for their own tests. Safety-related questions and take regulatory action when the science does not support the continued safe use of additives in foods. James Jones, FDA Deputy Commissioner of Human Foods, explained when announcing the proposal. BVO, or brominated vegetable oil has been used as an emulsifying agent since the 1930s to ensure citrus-flavored agents don't float to the top of sodas. Sticking a dozen bromide atoms to triglyceride creates a dense oil that floats even throughout water when mixed with less dense fats. Yet that's not BVO's only trick. Animal studies have strongly implied that the compound can slowly build up in our fatty tissues. With bromide's potential ability to prevent iodine from doing its all-important work inside the thyroid, health authorities around the world have been suspicious of this emulsifier's risks for decades. In fact, BVO is already banned in many countries, including India, Japan, and nations of the European Union, and was outlawed in the state of California in October 2022, with legislation due to take effect in 2027. Yet the FDA has been slow to convince. I wonder why. You know, Roundup. When do we bring up that? Being banned. It took so long to ban the stuff that's in Roundup. In the 1950s, the agency regarded the ingredient as generally recognized as safe. An official classification afforded the items that have either been appropriately tested or for ingredients in common use prior to 1958 don't appear to be harmful. That changed the following decade when questions were raised over its possible toxicity, promoting the FDA to overturn its GRAS classification for BVO and temporarily limit its use to relatively small concentrations of no more than 15 parts per million, exclusively in citrus-flavored drinks. Data on the risk posed by even these small amounts of BVO over time hasn't been easy to collect, relying heavily on long-term studies that reevaluate health effects in a significantly sized sample of people. Yet the evidence has been slowly mounting. Okay, Kat, why did you thank you, Kat. Say, messed up something. A UK study in the 1970s found bromide was building up in human tissues, with animal studies linking high concentrations of BVO with heart and behavioral problems. It's taken time and a number of further studies, but on the back of more recent animal studies based on relative concentrations of BVO humans are likely to ingest, the FDA is finally convinced that there is sufficient evidence to ban its use altogether. Most major soda companies are fortunately ahead of the game. PepsiCo and Coca-Cola Co. have been phasing out the ingredients of their product over the past decade. Over the years, many beverage makers reformulated their products to replace BVO with an alternative ingredient. And today, few beverages in the US actually contain BVO. The ban could lead to a sign of more things to come, with Jones announcing that the agency is reviewing regulations that authorize the use of certain food additives, with a view to automatically prohibit the approval of any food coloring agents found to cause cancer in humans or animals, making for a more nimble bureaucratic process. The final call on the FDA's reclassification of BVO went through a lengthy review process that has now been completed. With sustainable alternatives to BVO already being used to make citrus drinks around the world taste tangy, down to the very last drop. Stupid joke. The internet is hard to beat. Alright. More on psychologist stuff. Out-of-body experiences have a surprising effect on some people. Out-of-body experiences, or OBS, OBE, can leave significant and lasting impressions on those who go through them, and can also boost feelings of empathy towards others, according to a new survey. OBEs have been known to occur in many scenarios, including when people are near death or hypnotized. Cat, you're walking across that again. In a 1982 paper reported that up to 15% of participants had experienced at least one OBE at some point in their lives. While OBEs have been linked to increased empathy before, here a team from the University of Virginia took a closer look at the relationship between the brain mechanisms brain mechanisms that might be behind it. In particular, the researchers looked at ego dissolution, or ego death, where someone's sense of self evaporates and they feel much more connected to everything around them and the universe. We explored the notion that OBEs may engender these changes through ego dissolution, which fosters a deep sense of unity and interconnectedness with others, writes the team led by neuroscientist Maureen Weller. We know that OBEs have a transformative effect. 55% of those who experience them report being profoundly changed afterwards, while 40% consider the OBE they've been through as the greatest experience of their lives. Fun! After OBEs, people often become more aware of the needs of others and show greater patience with others. And this is where the empathy comes in, an ability to understand and share the feelings of others. The feeling of disembodiment and removal from the physical realm that characterizes OBEs leads to ego dissolution, the researchers say. That then develops into a strengthening relationship with other people. The sense of self is no longer centered on the me and is perceived more as a process than as a separate entity, write the researchers. OBEs are similar to a psychedelic drug high, and the researchers suggest, and some of the results are the same, and the way these mind-altering substances can make us feel more connected with everyone around us. As for the mechanisms behind this phenomenon, the study points to the temporal parietal junction as one brain region that might be involved. The TPJ handles our sense of where we are in physical space and manages inputs from the senses, and malfunctions in this regions have been previously linked to OBEs. The whole default model network, which the TPJ is a part of, could be involved, researchers say. It handles self-reflection and internal narratives about ourselves, and so is tied to our ego. I love that it's 100% people would now go with the ego, but it was originally id. May be disrupted during or after OBEs. This study relies on joining the dots between previous pieces of research and didn't involve any experiments of its own, which you could key to understand that when you future studies might enlist the help of virtual reality or individuals who can self-induce OBEs on demand to explore, or do drugs, OBEs experimentally. The exploration, refinement, and application of these methods to enhance empathy in individuals, whether it's through OBE-related ego dissolution or other approaches, is an exciting avenue with potential profound implications in individuals and society at large. Alright, last one! Yes, Cat, I know, I still have to feed you. I forgot before the start of the stream, but please, one more, please. Cashless payments are changing our spending behavior, study reveals. Cash served us well over the 3,000 years, with shells as a forerunner to coins and notes, but now we're seeing a definite shift to electronic payments in developed nations. According to a new study, cashless payments are making us spend more than before, too. A team from the University of Adelaide and the University of Melbourne in Australia conducted a meta-analysis of 71 previously published papers looking at spending habits of across 17 different countries. It seems that tapping our phone or card on terminal leads to us being less restrictive to our budget compared to picking notes or coins out, perhaps because there's no physical representation of how much is being spent. To prevent spending more than planned, we recommend customers carry cash instead of cards wherever they can. Cash help. Yep. Perhaps because there's no physical representation of how much is being spent. To prevent spending more than planned, we recommend consumers carry cash instead of cards wherever they can, and act as a self-control method. I mean, did they also, just out of curiosity, since that popped into my mind, did they also add, of the 17 different countries, was Japan included? Because Japan is still very cash and coin based. But I haven't finished reading this, but says marketing researcher Lachlan Sobukuk, I'm sorry, sir, University of Adelaide. When the using cash, people physically count and hand over notes and coins, making the act of spending more salient. If nothing physically is handed over, it's easy to lose track about how much is spent. The differences in spending were small but significant, researchers say. It was greater for conspicuous consumption spending, which is buying items that signal status, so luxury clothing and jewelry, for example. It's a link that's been spotted before, but never across so many different experiments and interactions. What's more, payments made when donating or tipping were more or less the same when made with cash compared to cashless payment methods, the researchers found. Throwing coins into buckets for charity is going around for a while yet. Against our expectations, we found that cashless payments do not necessarily lead to greater tips or donations in comparison to cash. A link was also found between more positive economic conditions and greater cashless effect, though this decreased slightly over time. Yeah, because people were running out of money! On the other hand, the level of inflation didn't seem to affect cash versus cashless spending in the data collected. They also found that cashless effect had grown weaker over time, suggesting that as cash payment methods become more common, they have a less impact on customers. This habituation effect is likely to increase as the world moves towards a cashless society. A factor that could be investigated in future research is whether the type of cashless spending used makes a difference. For instance, the use of credit cards compared with paying with Google Pay or Apple Pay. The study authors are keen to extend their research into the most recent trends in spending and the newest payment technology, including cryptocurrencies. As far as I'm concerned, cryptocurrencies aren't currencies, they're scams. And the host of Buy Now, Pay Later services available to us to see what effects they have. The transition towards a cashless society seems almost inevitable. I believe this research is crucial because it shines a light on overlooked aspects of this transition, how payment methods influence our spending behavior. This understanding can help empower us to make more informed purchasing decisions. Alright, that's the last one and my voice is going! Woo! Sorry. Alright. Yep. Yeah, let's see who we're gonna torture. The raid. Same thing. Thinking. Hey, if I haven't... I hope she isn't about to leave. Alright, y'all. This was Ishnai Laboratories. I hope you have a good day or night, whatever it is, wherever it is you currently are. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and comment. I have someone. And thank y'all for joining me on this nerd alert kind of thing where it's not a common thing for me. And it isn't as popular as other things, but I enjoy it.